My slides are loading right now as we transition screens, but I hope everyone is having a great Thursday, and we're glad you're here. We're glad that you joined us today. Everyone, just some logistics before we get started. Everyone's mic is muted, so no one has mic rights until we get to the team update component, and then just make sure your speakers are on so that you can hear the presentation. And if you want to talk up today's session on social media, you can use the hashtag xAPI cohort. You can tag the xAPI gnome. Today's presentation is Wendy Morgan. Her Twitter handle is up top. So welcome everyone, and welcome to the ninth session of Cohort. We are officially into the final quarter of Cohort this semester. It has been a really great semester seeing how the teams have progressed and hearing about all of your projects, and we'll just continue to learn more. So today's guest presentation and guest speaker is Wendy Morgan. She is a Learning and Development Senior Strategist at the Frank Porter Graham Child Development Institute at the University of North Carolina, Chapel Hill. She's going to be presenting an xAPI case study on enabling strategic design of research-based community-focused training. As of today, we have 483 people registered for Cohort, which is awesome. And then we'll get into some team check-ins where our teams will be able to share how their projects are progressing, where they might need support, and things like that. So behind the mic today is myself, Jessica Jackson. Aaron, Stellar, and Jamie Washington are our producers today. We also have Megan Torrance on the line with us today during web session, and Matt Cleaver. So thank you all for joining. As for these last few weeks, we've been focusing on case studies around xAPI and really seeing how different organizations have applied xAPI and used xAPI data in their workplaces. So today we're continuing with these conversations with Wendy, and then we have another case study next week with Tim Dickinson of Watershed. Then we'll start hearing about project team demos. And at the end of today's session, I'm going to talk a little bit about how we're going to sign up for project team demos, and how you can let us know if you're interested. So with that, we'll get into our case study, Enabling Strategic Design of Research-Based Community-Focused Training by Wendy Morgan. And I'm going to transition over to her presentation, and she is going to share her screen for us.
So actually, while we move, because this is the presentation, so she'll want to stop sharing and instead share her screen rather than the presentation, I think. Well, you guys get that set up. This is Megan. I'm going to tell you a story about, what was it, 2 years ago? I got a call. It was a beautiful August day, or July day, and I got a call from Wendy, who was curious about getting started with xAPI, and she was building some storyline courses and needed some help with some JavaScript, and could we help her out? I said, of course we can help you out. And it is super exciting to see the progress that she has made in this intervening time, and all the work that she, with some help from Matt, has been able to do. And so I'm actually really, really geeked about seeing this, but then also kind of sharing this with the world. So Wendy, it looks like you are all set to go.
All right, well, I'm just going to add to that story a little bit, because it's one of the stories that I really love to tell. So when we first started out on our journey, I didn't know where to go for advice, or how to get this started. I knew that I wanted xAPI, and I knew why, and I knew what I wanted to do, but I didn't know how. And I got pointed in the right direction to Torrance Learning and to Matt, who has just been a godsend to us. And as we got started, I said, but I don't want to have to learn all this JavaScript, and I don't want to have to rely on somebody else to do it either. So could you just make me a calculator to like churn out these statements? Because they kind of seem to have like a formula to them. I'm sure we could probably make that happen. And they did. And then that became xAPI. So it was pretty cool. I feel like it's been a really nice partnership that's hopefully benefited both parties, but it certainly has benefited us. So on that note, I'm Wendy Morgan, and I'm a Learning and Development Strategist at the Frank Porter Graham Child Development Institute at the University of North Carolina at Chapel Hill. And I am here to talk to you about our fairly unique learning ecosystem and why I like it, which is because it supports our instructional design strategy. So I am having trouble moving my slide forward. Let me try this. There we go. Great. All right, so a little bit of background about FPG and really any research institute just to get started. The university itself pays maybe 10 or 15 folks of our research institution, and the rest of them, of the 200 plus people in our research institution, are funded by grants. So they're all kind of independently funded, almost like small entrepreneurial organizations underneath this organizational umbrella. And a lot of them some of them are research-based, a lot of them are research to practice translation, but all of them are doing external professional development, training, technical assistance for people like practitioners, educators, or administrators. We're not doing internal training at all, which is like a whole other conversation. So we're doing all external training, and all of these funded projects have different audiences. They have their own different websites, and they don't need each other's data. So in this sort of organizational context, an LMS is a really bad fit. And another reason that LMS is a bad fit is that there's usually no money in these grants for technical infrastructure. So none of the projects can buy their own system. We really needed to have a system that supported everybody. So that is, sorry, getting all my little notifications. So another background note that I think will be handy as we talk about challenges and just moving forward is the technical assistance level. So there are 3 levels that funders usually want to see, or at least 2 of these, in technical assistance that are provided by grant-funded projects. Universal, which means anybody can access it. Targeted, which means that you have some limited partnership with the project staff where you're maybe having coaching calls or some consultation with the staff. And then finally intensive, which is where you're having an ongoing partnership with the project staff, and you have folks going out on site to the school or county, what have you, the audience, to be providing regular on-site coaching over time. So with that knowledge, we'll move on to sort of the challenges that we faced as an organization. And the first, when I actually came on board, there was literally 0 learning activity data being collected from anything because the LMS wouldn't be a good fit, and they really didn't know how to do it. So when we started talking about what kind of data we needed, it was really clear that the data that we needed had to be conceptually meaningful. Because even at that universal level of TA where everybody can access it, your learners, who are people who are actually trying to grow in terms of very specific things, usually evidence-based practices and implementing those, they can really only grow from meaningful experiences and meaningful feedback about those experiences. So we are designing custom interactions that are pretty specific, teaching pretty specific skills, and we need the data from the learner activity to be pretty specific also. And that wasn't going to happen within SCORM or really even just what Storyline provides. So then that takes us to actually let me back up and say that's at the universal level, because what we're doing is we're collecting that very customized data, and then we can put it into feedback that we're providing back to these learners, like personalized feedback at the end of the course, which could even draw from activity through previous courses and tell them where they need to, how they need to focus in order to grow further. And then at targeted and intensive levels, the modules need to feed into the work of the coaches who are going to be working directly with these folks, which leads to our next challenge, which is that the on-site work is really costly. It takes a lot of time, it takes a lot of money to have people traveling out to sites, and so there's always pressure to reduce those costs, and that requires accomplishing more in less time, which requires a really good strategy for blended learning. And the best strategy for blended learning is to tailor your on-site work to the very specific needs of the people that you're serving. And that requires really conceptually meaningful learner activity data from your on-site, or I'm sorry, your e-learning. So with that, first of all, while I'm sharing my screen, I'm not able to see the question. So if y'all could just help me out and let me know if there are any questions that we need to be
none yet. As they come in, though, I might just interrupt and read them to you.
Oh. Yeah, that would be great. Thanks. Okay, so I'm going to be just talking about a couple of sort of case studies or a couple of projects within FPG and sort of talking you through what we did for these projects. One of them is a project called xAPI, and it's funny because they're within a bigger project called the Impact Center, which is within FPG. And then the second one is called Affirm for Paras. So xAPI, or Implementation Capacity for Triple P, they really needed a full-on strategy. They didn't really know where to go, but they wanted some help with it. So what they were doing was relying upon reading people PowerPoint slides, which is really ineffective at solving real-world problems in a hands-on way. So they wanted us to help them make that a little bit better for them. They wanted to allow sites to lift what they learned and apply it to their day-to-day lives, because this project is an implementation project. So in other words, the whole focus of this project is to be training people how to use evidence-based practices and how to scale them up into their community. So let me give you a kind of a once upon a time. So that was once upon a time, and now as we're going through the story of that, we realized as we got into it, they had two major challenges. The first was how to make it engaging and fun, because the way that it was when it first started was really neither. And then how to determine what else they needed, because they didn't know what they didn't know. So that's always the trick when you first start out with something. So their first step was to design some e-learning, some online curriculum. The modules were rooted in strategy, and they were designed to be as engaging as possible, employing gamification elements, avatars, and story, conveying didactic information with approaches that inspired interest, such as whiteboard video, and to be as effective as possible by providing interactive hands-on engagement with real-world problems that the folks that they were training actually faced. And at the end of each module, learners receive personalized feedback. This is an example of a worksheet that they might get after engaging in the modules. So the way that we sort of design this is the folks at xAPI are working on site with a lead agency of a county coalition of agencies that are looking to scale up PPP, or the Positive Parenting Program. It's all across North Carolina and South Carolina that they're working. So they're really trying to increase the effectiveness and efficiency of their blended learning processes. This is one of the ways that they can just kind of show up on site ready to go. They take a text entry response on a module and bring it into an on-site follow-up visit to workshop how to approach someone about a difficult issue. This is an example of the sorts of data that they might find. The implementation specialist can see the specific actions taken by each learner as they progress through the module. This is just a screenshot of the LRS database that can be exported as CSV. And this is a custom report that they can take a look at. So the first is sort of the straight data, and then this is the summary of that data. So this is a custom report of the summary data from interactions that are representing 5 different learning objectives for this particular module. And the red, yellow, green light gives an overview of the strengths and weaknesses of the learner on each one of these learning objectives. We provide the implementation support providers, the on-site folks, with a lot of options. So this is what we call the data dashboard, and they can just kind of get a quick and dirty view of how this person specifically is doing. And then they take a look at each person that they're serving on site. They usually have a group of about 8 to 10. Each service provider has a group of 8 to 10. Of course, this is all across 2 states. So they take a look at each of their people and they see how they're doing so that they can figure out how they're going to tailor their approach on site. We also have much more detailed blended learning instructions about how to deal with each piece of data depending on how each service provider or support provider wants to work. And then we document everything in case they want to drill down, or in case we have forgotten, because we do a lot of these now, and we need to know how we programmed it. So we take each screen and indicate what is the variable that we provided to the LRS from that activity that we designed, and what the score is and what it means, how to use it, and so forth. And the support providers can pull up this documentation if they want to when they're looking at the raw data also. So with the learner data, on-site implementation specialists are armed with knowledge about the strengths and weaknesses of the group that they're addressing, and they can utilize their time most effectively to address the issues that are most in need of addressing. So that's the sort of blended learning strategy. The learners are not just asked to do an online piece of training and then show up and do something that's not related to that, or we're not acknowledging what they did there and blending them together. The on-site TA is actually tailored to their personal needs according to the learner activity data that we captured. And that is made possible by the xAPI LRS system. And since we started with them, we've really begun to kind of circle back to that number 2 question: what else do we need and what don't we know? We don't know what we don't know, so what's going on? What have we found out? And what we've realized is that we really need to strategize a comprehensive lesson plan for everything that they do, and including tools, so that the module is just one tool in this overall lesson plan, and we have a slew of other tools, job aids, online calculators, role plays, but it all started with the e-learning that we designed and tailoring the on-site work for them, and the success of that has led to greater buy-in and need for our work, perceived need for our work. The second case study is a firm for paraprofessionals. So this is an autism research group. A firm stands for Autism Focused Intervention Resources and Modules. And this group's efforts actually went viral recently, and their news made headlines because they provided some much-needed support to parents of students with autism who are now stuck at home instead of school. These modules that I'm going to be talking about today are aimed at paraprofessionals working in schools. So there were originally 6 modules that each address an evidence-based practice for working with students with autism. And they're listed here: prompting, reinforcement, time delay, visual cues, visual schedules, and peer support. And after some initial usability testing, we actually scrapped number 5 because it wasn't a good fit, because people were generally already using some sort of visual schedule and it was already tailored, and they were finding it difficult to sort of implement what we were suggesting. So we are making that a supplemental module. But the goals, or essentially learning objectives for each, are that these paraprofessionals taking the modules would learn how to plan, use, and monitor each of these evidence-based practices through the module. And then we also have there was also a blended learning approach in a way. It was a single case design, randomized control trial sort of design. And they were taking the module as sort of the first step and then utilizing the data from the module to tailor their work afterward. And so far, the numbers look higher than they've ever had before. So we're collecting formative assessments throughout the modules, as well as summative assessments reflected in post-tests that can be compared to pre-tests from before that. So the paraprofessionals have the opportunity to practice planning for the EDPs, or the implementing the EDPs, by utilizing a planning guide and having a simulated conversation with their supervising teacher. And they also have the opportunity to watch another professional use whatever evidence-based practice they're learning with fidelity. In other words, they're doing it the right way. And then they can watch another professional try to use the evidence-based practice, and they rate the fidelity of that practitioner and get feedback on their rating of the fidelity of that practitioner. Finally, they have the opportunity to actually use the EDP firsthand and collect data on the target student. So in other words, they have the opportunity to try out implementing this EDP, or evidence-based practice, in a controlled setting where screwing up is not actually going to hurt anybody, and we can compare their behavior in this virtual environment to their actual fidelity of practice afterward. So within these modules, we're able to delineate the steps of each behavior, identify those steps as specific learning objectives, and then look closely at the way in which paras behave in this controlled setting, as well as before and or afterward in the actual classroom. So the learner activity data that's gathered from these module activities might be considered formative assessment, and then we also gather summative assessment. An example of that is this pre-post test. So this activity is actually from a different module, an intro module, designed to measure the degree to which paraprofessionals attribute the behavior of students with autism to the students themselves, which is an internal attribution, versus to the teacher or the environment, which would be an external attribution. And it's expected that after going through this introductory module that teaches them a lot about autism and how and why EDPs support autism, that they would see more in these examples that can be attributed to external factors than they saw before learning the material. And we have actually
Wendy,
found
we have
that
a question.
to be the case.
Are you tracking the observation data in the actual classroom using xAPI as well?
Sure. We are not. We are checking the data in the classroom through other means, usually just clipboards that the researchers are holding, or iPads sometimes to put the data straight into the database that they're utilizing. What they tend to do from the xAPI data is just export it and then collect it together with the other data sources for analysis. But it is something we could do. It's just, I think for our purposes, setting that up, the cost-benefit analysis of setting that up doesn't work out for us right now. Does that answer the question? Okay. All right. So this right here is actually a look behind the scenes at the data that we're collecting from the interactions throughout these modules. So you can kind of see how each piece of data is summed into meaningful variables. So if you look under where it says step, you can see plan. And remember, we had sort of three large categories, plan, use, and monitor. And within each of those categories, we have sort of two main variables that are meaningful to us. So general information gathering and EBT-specific planning are two parts of planning that are different but both important. And we have several interactions that would lead into either of those. And we've got the scoring and the variable within the storyline module, and then we add them all up and report them so that we have those variables. This is during the planning for the programming, this form that you're seeing here. And this is how the data collected looks when it's provided in personalized learner feedback at the end of the module. So just going to take us back. Oh, well, on the planning form, we have specific pieces of feedback that correspond to certain scores that a learner would be achieving throughout the module. So once we know what the score is, then we pull that score and we provide the specific feedback for those learners about what they need to do next based on how they're already doing. And then this is a custom report for the researchers, for the staff of this project, that they can utilize to see how folks are doing and to correlate or analyze alongside other data. So together, these highly interactive and hands-on modules and the learner activity data that we collect from them allow us to deliver personalized feedback to learners at that kind of universal TA level. They allow us to gather every piece of relevant feedback and organize and categorize them into discrete variables that we can use to analyze learner behavior, as well as the way that we designed the professional development to begin with. So some low-hanging fruit in terms of research potential of these variables would be the effect of the training on the fidelity of practice and knowledge gain, and again, all possible through our xAPI LRS-based learning ecosystem. It's just been a godsend to us. It's changed everything in terms of how we provide web-based learning, and even how we provide on-site learning, because it's all blended together now. So with that, I'm happy to answer questions.
Awesome. Thank you for that. If there are any questions, feel free to post them in the chat. I see one question coming through now. Can you walk us through some of the data planning in a bit more depth? How long did it take you to figure out what items to collect?
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Well, so I think that really depends on the project. So we have a lot of different projects that we support, and I would say even just the two that we provided or that I sort of covered in this presentation, they vary considerably in terms of the process of planning and the time spent planning, and even the knowledge beforehand of what data we need. So the Affirm project is very, very specific. They know exactly what they want people to be doing. They know exactly what data that they want to collect. They have a predetermined way that they will follow up on that data, and there's a lot of that is coming out of their research. So I would almost be hard pressed to delineate what is data planning time and what is just research time. But the xAPI project, I think they're kind of building the plane as they fly it. So we figure something out, and then we circle back around and see, did that work, what didn't work, what did work, and so it's really a very iterative process. So the data planning there is kind of melded together with usability testing and effectiveness evaluation. So I would say a lot of planning time, but I think that the planning time, it's not discrete. It's kind of blended with lots of other activities. So I see another question here. Did you find any challenges with presenting xAPI concepts and connections with learning analytics? You have to provide we have not talked to any of our stakeholders about what xAPI is. What we do is we provide them, we go through the planning process and we make sure that the data is working for them and that they're getting what they need. It's presented to them in the way that they need to. So we're creating customized reports that they can use. And we're having conversations in a variety of different ways with them about the utility of their data. But the xAPI concepts themselves are not really, those aren't really conversations that we're having because they're just beyond the scope of what most of the stakeholders actually care about. They want to know that they can utilize their data and how they're going to use it, but they don't really care about how it got reported to the LRS, for example.
You got a lot of compliments around your explanations and making things very clear for folks today. So thank you so much, Wendy, for sharing. If there are any more questions for Wendy, just go ahead and put them in the chat. If not, we'll move on into some team updates. So I'll give it a few more seconds to see if there are any more questions in the chat, and then we'll move on.
I saw one question, but it looks like Matt answered it.
Megan, I'm going to go get the learning article and paste that into the, there's an article about this too, so I'll get that pasted into the chat.
Awesome. Thank you, Megan.
Yeah.
Awesome. Thank you for telling. Thanks for
sharing.
So we're going to hop into some cohort business and talking about our teams now. We're going to talk a little bit about where your team should be. So thank you, Megan. And Megan posted in the chat an article all about the case studies that you just witnessed. We're in week 9. So this means that you are applying next steps, thinking about what's in it for you, thinking about what you want to do, how you want to demonstrate, how you want to show to folks what you've been learning in cohort. We're 2 weeks away from project team demos, and you should be preparing for that. So I wanted to talk a little bit and briefly about project team demos and how we're going to get teams to sign up for them. The way that we usually manage project team demonstrations is that we have 3 open presentation slots on 2 days. So our days are April 9th and April 16th. And we have 3 slots available for any team to sign up. You can choose which day you want to present on. Usually we break them up into about 20-minute presentations, so that way you have 12 to 15 minutes for your presentation and then a little bit of time for questions. Usually teams do include some slides with their demos. We'll be doing this online here in Adobe Connect during our regular session time. The presenter can choose to share a screen, to share their screen with a live demo of the functionality if they wish, or you can send your slides directly to me and I can upload them for you. Your project does not have to be perfectly or completely finished. You can just share what the team has accomplished and learned. And I want to reiterate that point. Your project does not have to have a perfect or completely finished demo. This is just an opportunity to share out what you've been working on, share out the kinks that you've been experiencing. Some projects go over multiple cohorts, and it would be helpful to even share out that and get folks that might be interested for next semester to continue on. So if you are interested in demonstrating your project, you can sign up by direct messaging me on Slack, and I will reserve your slot. All right, so for the next section, we're going to do our team check-ins using GitHub. If you are the presenter for your teams, go ahead and raise your hand, and our producers behind the scenes will be giving you mic access. If you are called in, what you're going to do to gain mic access is to press star twice. So I'm going to transition my screen over to the GitHub page. Alrighty, so we're gonna start with team adaptive learning. If there is anyone on the line, Brady, or anyone that is able to give the team update. Okay, given as no one is available, I'll read it for them. So the accomplishment this week is that they continue to work on the WordPress plugin that will organize and display content. It's now ready to accept content, which is really exciting. They might need some support creating xAPI statements. So I'll refer them to also xAPI they have access to. What they hope to accomplish in the next week is to add content to the module, create the views and navigation functionality, and develop xAPI statements to send from the module. All right, Team Alexa, I think I saw Izzy on the line to give this update. So if Izzy has, alrighty, go ahead, Izzy.
I'm here. Thanks. So yeah, we were able to do a little bit of work. Brian actually updated some of our choice blocks in our project to include a couple more intents, which basically in layman's terms just means that we're going to be able to recognize more things that a potential user might say. Because before we were only accepting very specific inputs. So if a user doesn't know what those specific inputs are, then it just kind of doesn't really work too well. Areas where we need support, nothing right now, more just kind of thinking through strategy for sending our statements over. I'm trying to make them more into like a template so I don't have to create specific, like very, very specific xAPI statements for each choice. Every time a caller gets a choice, I didn't want to have to create a custom block xAPI statement for that, but I think we might have to. And what we hope to do next week, well, actually creating those blocks, which is what I was supposed to do last week and I didn't get a chance to. So just copying that over into next week.
Awesome. Thanks for sharing, Izzy. Team audio video. Is anyone on the line to give an update for team audio video? Jeremy or anyone? Alrighty. Seeing as no one has given, we have Team Early Childhood Education, and Joanne has asked me to read the updates this week because she's not in a space that she can share out. So accomplishments for the week, she mapped some competencies for the levels before and after to create simple data to work with. She tested the Pebble InDesign plugin. what she needs or this team needs this week is some feedback. So if you want to test and offer feedback to their project, go ahead and join that Slack channel. What they hope to accomplish in the next week is to continue working on Pebble and CAS implementation. For anyone following the ECE Care Interactions portion from last cohort, as of May 21st, 2020, the Alexa Baby Activity Skill API is no longer available, but the files they've linked there into a GitHub repository. Alrighty. Team MakeyMakey. Brian, are you on the line to give that update? I see Brian Duck is on the line. Can we grant him mic access?
Are you hearing me now?
I can hear you, Brian.
Okay, thank you. This is Brian from Team MakeyMakey. Accomplishments for the week included Joanne providing some examples of JavaScript and JSON for sending statements to the LRS, so we're using those to model how our learning record provider will be sending the statements. We were able to make progress on our stage 2, where we're building a prototype response board for use with the MakeyMakey. This is a physical board that someone can touch to generate a response to the attached computer. MakeyMakey emulates a keyboard, and this allows someone to interact with something external rather than a keyboard and simulate a button push or some other contact. And then we've made progress on stage 3, the initial effort of prototyping the learning record provider in our live code community edition. This file's been created, and we're working to integrate the tin-can.js library into live code to be able to build our statements through that library. So I already have a stack or a file created that is a live code project that allows us to interact with a jQuery, which is another JavaScript library, and that is serving as a model for us to reach out and connect with tin-can.js, as I mentioned. Areas where we may need some support, we're just looking for encouragement, applause, and kudos. I have some kudos for Joanne for providing the examples of the JavaScript, and we're planning on meeting at 3:45 this afternoon with Joanne and Doug. Hopefully Joanne will be able to connect in. If not, she'll be welcome to listen in, as are any other cohort members. And for next week, we're going to be working on finalizing that learning record provider in live code to send those statements based on Joanne's example JavaScript and JSON. And then I've made purchases for a second MakeyMakey board, and I'm working to build a more finalized prototype of the response board. That's sort of where our team is at. Does anyone have any comments or questions?
Awesome. Thank you, Brian. Our next team is Team Pebble. Is Kristen or Judy on the line to give an update here? Okay. So some accomplishments this week. They were able to use the InDesign extensions and created simple correlations from the previous and next competencies and updated the Google Sheet, which is linked there. What they hope to accomplish in the next week is to work on some sample Pebble books. Some cool new updates include the ability to show the plugin you've created within the InDesign document, which technically InDesign doesn't do, but apparently their developers found a way. So they're having a cool face there. It doesn't look like they have any needs in the next week, but if you want to hop into and see what Pebble is up to, go ahead and join their Slack channel. Team Podcast. Is anyone on the line to give an update for Team Podcast? Sam, I think you're on. Sam sent the update in chat and said, while the interest is in this project, while the interest hasn't stalled, the work certainly has in the last 2 weeks. So it's looking like they'll be up and running a little later, but some other things have caused them to reprioritize time. Thanks, Sam, for that update. Team SharePoint LMS integration. Stephanie, are you on the line to share any updates that you have? Yes, Megan, I guess they have been distracted. All right. Seeing as there's no one for Team SharePoint, let's see Team Sheets and Zapier. Is anyone on the line? Jason, I think I saw Jason on the line today. Jason, are you able to give an update? Okay, thank you, thank you. Matt. They're officially lurking, Jason says, for Team Sheets. Team Smart Builder, they have a question. So they're working with Learning Locker LRF and using queries to design visualizations. Their queries target the xAPI statements, but the visualization tools have limitations on labeling. Is there a way when querying xAPI statements to provide a back to a specific value, something like a statement result response equals X, then value, so we can use that value in our visualizations? If this is possible, please reach out to them. So if you have any feedback on this question, go ahead and join their Slack channel. And then finally, I think that also Izzy said that Team Alexa is also investigating whether Smart Builder can do that visualization. So, are there any updates for Team Unity 3D? Alrighty, seeing as there are none, I'm going to jump back into our presentation to wrap up today's cohort web session. And as we're transitioning to the presentation, just going to cover some good things to know. Next week we'll be here at 2 o'clock p.m. and we have a case study by Tim Dickinson from Watershed. You can use the link. You can also call in. You can sign up for the xAPI party on May 7th. The sign-up link is there. And I wanted to put a plug-in for teams that want to present online at the xAPI party. This will take place on Adobe Connect. There are 5 time slots, 45 minutes per presentation, including time for Q&A. If your team knows that they're going to be interested in presenting at the party, it's all virtual this year. Surprise, surprise. Thanks, Megan. We'll be asking you to submit your presentations beforehand. We just need to know if you're going to be presenting. Everybody is presenting online this year. So send me a Slack message and let us know. Also, if you want us to share information with your employer that this is a conference and not a party because the name presents obstacles for participating, just let us know. We can do that as well. With that, continue to stay safe and well, and let's continue to use all of our virtual tools and habits that we've cultivated through Cohort and beyond. Have a great rest of your week, and I look forward to connecting next week.